Hi everyone, I am Jeff Lawton. I'm going to look at a game from the Chess24 Banter Blitz Cup Semi-Final. This was played a couple of days ago. White is the world champion Magnus Carlsen, 2-8-6-3, and his opponent is Sunan Sjugirov, a Russian grandmaster who's 2-6-7-5 and he's ranked 62nd in the world. And the game I'm going to look at is the very first game in this 3-minute blitz match. So Carlsen opened with e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4. So we've got a Sicilian main line. cd4, knight d4, knight f6, knight to c3, and now a6. Now earlier in the day, Magnus had played incredibly. He played like some warm-up games on Chess24, and he'd been playing the move rook g1, which is what he played in this game. So Sjugirov replied with e5, knight b3, and now bishop to g4, which he had a bit of a think over, good 20 odd seconds, and it's a sort of unusual move, which Magnus said he didn't really understand because he's happy to play bishop e2. He thought the idea was that black wanted this, and then he can hit the rook with queen here. But after bishop e2, black retreated, and in a way he's just let white get another developing move. So we had bishop e3, bishop e7, and now g4. And the idea is to gain quick control of the d5 square. So black can play d5, but then white sort of trades pieces off and gets a slightly better endgame. So instead of that, we had b5, and then g5 was played. Knight fd7, and now knight to d5. So Carlsen said that this was a clear advantage for white already because he's managed to push the knight back, and he's played g4, g5 without having to spend 2 tempi on advancing the pawn to g3, g4, or even h3, h4 in 2 goes. And so the knight on d5 gives him a clear advantage. So we had knight c5, knight captures on c5, d captures, and now a4. So at this point, Carlsen is about 20 seconds up on the clock, and a4 breaks up the black queen side. So rather than go here, when perhaps you can go bishop c4, or I think Magnus actually said he was going to go a5 to fix b6 square as a target for his knight. But instead of that, Sjugirov played b takes a4. Then we had c3, which opens up the queen's route to take on a4, and also the pawn does a good job of controlling these 2 squares, which means that when the black knight develops to here, it's unable to come to either of these squares. So it's a good square. So it's a good move to inhibit the opponent's knight. And then we had castles for black, and queen takes a4. Then in this position we had bishop d5, e takes d5, and now bishop to d6, trying to keep the position closed. Just give a quick example of what could happen after queen d5, then we could have h4, so just continuing the attack, knight c6 in order to develop, and then bishop to c4, this very nice diagonal, and the queen has to keep the knight protected because of the queen attacking it, and then we can have rook d1. Again, the queen has to go back to keep the knight protected. We can attack the knight again with bishop to d5, and after rook c8, then white can blast open the king's side because the f pawn is pinned by the bishop. So possible line just to show what can happen to black: hg6, rook takes g6, and now if bishop d6, white can crash through with because rook g6 is threatening the knight, by the way. So if bishop d6 to cover that, we can play, among other things, rook g7, king g7, queen g4 check, king h8, and then queen h5 check, forcing black to replies here. Notice he's not able to play this because of queen g5 would be mate. So after queen g4, king h8, queen h5, king g8, and then we can play bishop h6, which now threatens queen g5. Mating next move, and knight e7 doesn't help because after check, knight g6, we can of course take that because of the pin on the f pawn, and then checkmate. So there's no other move ready for black to try, but well, king here, it's losing the rook anyway. White could play this if he wanted to, and then king here, and then it's just a quick checkmate on g7 or g8. So h8 just shows this is very dangerous for black to take the pawn on d5. So Sunan played bishop to d6, and he was now down to less than a minute. And we had h4, knight d7. Now basically it's, as Carlsen said, it's a bit like a bullet game now. Then we had h5. So white's pieces are much better than black's. And the attack, once you attack like this against the Sicilian, you're usually doing very well. And we had rook to b8. And now swinging the queen across to the king side. It's all very beautiful, elegant manoeuvring by Carlsen in this game, and his intention is to go g6 and then take on h7, and then queen g7 will be mate. So we had e4, and now g6, h6, no real choice. If you play f takes, then queen e6 check wins the bishop due to the fork. So instead of that, Sunan played h6, and now Carlsen played bishop here, which he thought was winning, but as he said at the time, he said, "Oh no, I've overlooked f5." But then it turns out white is still doing very well after queen g5 because the two passed pawns are very strong. For example, if you take here, then knight f6 to stop the mate, and we can go g7. We can't play rook f7 because queen h8 is mate. So we have to try the move rook e8 to hang on to the rook. And then rook to g6, now threatening the knight. And after bishop e5, we can now play bishop c4. The bishop can't be attacked here. And d6 is happening, and there's basically nothing that black can do here. For example, if you try and blockade the pawn, we can play rook a6, rook b6, take the rook on b6, queen b6, and now d6 check, knight d5, we can take that with check, and only legal move again for black, and then bishop b6 is mate. So still would have been strong for white even after the better move f5. Sunan played knight e5, and we had gf7 check, rook f7, and queen to e6. Now there's some very strong threats for white. So we had king f8, and now which is a really elegant game by Magnus Carlsen. He's now bringing the rook across to attack. So it's a really beautiful game. The bishop's piercing down this way. The queen is sort of in the action here. The rook is attacking this way, and the rook is attacking this. Everything's just piled in against the king. Really very nice game indeed. And then we had rook b6, and in this position Magnus found very strong moves. So I'll just pause the video and see if you can find the continuation that Carlsen found with 40 seconds left on his clock, and Sunan at this point was down to about 11 seconds. Okay, welcome back, and congratulations if you spotted rook takes g7, which has to be taken, otherwise simply rook f7 is game over. So we had rook g7, bishop g7, and king g7. And now you will have to have seen the next move, as I'm sure you did if you played this. Now the rook comes along the 7th rank. There's no way for black to put a piece in the way. If you play bishop c7, it just runs into queen e5 check, and the bishop is pinned, and so we win the bishop. And well, shortly after that, the game really. So Sunan played king h8. If he'd played the better move, king to f8, then white could play queen here check. You've got to go to e8, otherwise queen g7 is mate. And now queen h8 check forces bishop to f8, and then queen e5 check forces bishop e7, and now this is well, obviously white's 2 pawns up with 3 pawns up, sorry, with a raging attack, and black's got no threats, but white could play something like queen here. Now you can't move the bishop because of queen f7 mate. Your rook has to keep protecting the third rank. I mean, you could try, well, say you went rook b2, for example, then you run into check, forcing the bishop away, and then checkmate on f7. And so black's only other attempt is queen here to try and free the rook to move, but then h6, which we can't take for black because of queen e7 mate. But then say rook b2, we can push the pawn to h7. Black's got to sacrifice rook b1, bishop d1, captures, king takes rook, queen d5, and after king e1, black's out of ideas now. There's no more checks. And after say bishop f8, we can just finish that off. Queen f8, king f8, get a queen, queen g8, and now queen f6 check, king e8, and checkmate. So king f8 would have lost, and in the game we had king h8. Magnus finished the game off with queen h6 check, king g8, queen g7 checkmate. So he started off the game, like I said, the match rather, that was 1-0. And he went on an absolute tear, and poor old Sunan, he didn't know what hit him. They kept playing this line in the Najdorf. I think they have 3 games in this line, and I think in the other game, there was another game with white where Magnus played the Jawava system, or he called it the Trent Jawava system, I think he called it. Yeah, and it was, but this game in particular, I really like it. I think it's my favourite game from this match. It was a complete shutout, by the way. It was 9-0. So Magnus doing a very good impression of Fischer's 11 out of 11. And but it's a really thematic Sicilian, and you know, Mike Carlsen seems to be able to play against the Sicilian and beat it without giving up material, which in itself is amazing. So I hope you enjoyed that game, and I certainly did. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, please thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you very much. Bye now.